Yeah. So we had always knew that we wanted to have the three full columns of racks, and for us it was a matter of how do we maximize out a limited space, a space where there's 1,100 square feet, about 750 square feet of growing space. How do we get the most out of that space, both in terms of production, but also economic value? And when I say production and also economic value, a lot of people always tie those directly together. But how you use the space, like we could still maximize the production of the space, but are we actually maximizing the economic value of the space? And so we focus on what crops have higher economic values and ultimately are higher in demand from our customers. And so everything is designed around the farm to maximize the output of certain varieties of crops, depending on size, depending on growth cycle, and depending on nutrient need. And so that third column really allows us to not only have maximum space on both sides of it for certain crops that are tall and are hard to harvest behind, but it also allows us to maneuver, because it's on rails, maneuver around everything, and still, if we want, we can have almost a 5-foot aisle to be doing our clean outs and maintenance projects. So that's been a really, really positive impact on the farm in terms of its production. And we still have a couple racks to go to really maximize it out. And then we're going to start working on really maximizing the movement of crops around the farm. So in my mind, we probably still have another 30% to go in terms of growth in the farm and maximizing its output, which is really exciting. And that's what we'll be tackling over the next 5 to 6 months, probably.
So, I mean, you're what, a year and a half into actually the grow space?
This space, it's about a year and a half since we took down the space, and we're just about at the point where we first started growing last year.
So from the very first time you opened up until now, the last time we were here, it's a big difference in how much is actually grown. Like the first time we came, everything looked great, everything looked full, hearty, and healthy, but versus now, a year into it, everything's like way bigger, way healthier. I mean, like the flowers, everything seemed to be blooming, everything we seemed to be doing what it needed to do. And I know that when we had our indoor grow, the longer we went, the better it got, kind of thing. So did that affect, I know you're a big planner, you're a big analytical guy, so how did that affect, you obviously planned out for a certain amount of crops within the system. Are you where you're at, or are you above where you're at because of how much better you've got to grow?
I'd say we're still somewhat on plan in terms of our production space. What we weren't able to account for was the diversity of crops that we're growing. And as we're getting data on those crops, knowing how productive they can actually be. In our original plans, we didn't necessarily, just at all. We didn't have all of these crops as a part of our financial modelings, our analytics of the space. We used 6 crops that I had already grown that I collected data on as our baseline, because that was the only, at least for me, the only logical way to do it, where at least I have data to back up these numbers. I can say, no, I've grown this amount of crop in this amount of space in this amount of time. And so we took that, but it turns out that we're currently growing one of those 6 crops in the farm. And the other 50 plus varieties that are growing right now, we didn't have financial modeling on. And we have some that are magnitudes more productive from a growth, a yield, and an economic standpoint. And then we have others that definitely don't hit the mark in terms of maximizing the output of the space. And So we have to look at those in terms of how popular is that crop with a chef? Is it an anchor crop they're going to buy week in, week out at a certain volume that we know that that rack is going to be economically productive at a certain rate week over week? If we know that, even if it may not meet our overall target in terms of profitability for that space, we may still grow those crops there because they then become a way to make sure that our customers see us every week and that we still get that face-to-face interaction with them. Because that's where, for us, that's where we get a lot of value in that feedback loop, in those conversations, and really building those relationships up. So if we know that they're going to use this crop week over week, we'll still grow it. We know we can make it up on other crops, but it's that constant review of everything.
Well, these different varieties, the newer varieties that you have, these were asked for by the chefs. These are what the market told you to grow for them.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens all the time. And it's funny because as in some of the conversations yesterday, we've tapped out a lot of their like dream crops because either we can't grow it or we already have grown it for them and it's available to them now. And so now they have to keep discovering, because we're going to keep asking. We're going to keep coming in and saying, have you seen anything new? Is there anything else that you want to play with? Is there something that we can experiment on? But that also goes to show that a lot of that weight of discovery has to fall on our shoulders. We have to take the time and the effort to do that. Otherwise, we're no longer, besides just being a grower, we're not that extra level of added value. We're introducing them to new products they haven't seen before, that they haven't had the opportunity to work with. And so for me, that's a big part of building these relationships is adding value outside of just the sale. We're introducing them to new products and expanding the palette. So I like to call it expanding the palette with which they paint or cook. And so the more that we can add to that palette, the more creative they can be and the more unique their restaurant can be from the one down the street. Because these guys in today's cutthroat restaurant world, they have to keep reinventing. It is not acceptable to maintain the same menu for months on end or a whole year. They're constantly having to keep reinventing. And so if we can bring in more and more new products and see if they like them, see if they want to work with them, then we're adding an additional layer of value into their business.
Driving around yesterday, I asked, what are some of the challenges that chefs are facing now? And we had a conversation that was then told to us later on by one of the chefs that we visited.
Mm-hmm.
So let's put this into perspective, and especially from a place of empathy as a farmer servicing this industry, servicing chefs. What are they having to go through that some people may be missing?
I mean, it's probably the best time to be a chef, but the hardest time to be a chef. I think there's all the celebrity around chefs nowadays has been really good for that profession. There's a lot of them making a lot of money out there right now, but there's also more pressure on them than ever. And I think that everybody sees the glitz and the glamour. What they don't realize is behind the scenes, these guys day in and day out put 18 hours of work in. And a lot of people just see when they're in the dining room and engaging with guests and they see the finished product, but they don't understand how much time and effort goes into just creating one dish in these restaurants. This is not an exercise of a quick hour or two experimenting with a recipe and playing around. These guys, some of these chefs work for months on one dish and they'll make it 100 times. Some of them don't. Some of them it takes 10 iterations. But people don't see that behind the scenes action that's going on, where that pressure is not just during service. That pressure is every day to keep developing, keep creating. And they, just like writers, they get creative blocks and they get stuck. And that pressure doesn't wane when they're having a creative block. It's not like a writer where you can, if you have a story and you get creative block, then you need to get through that quickly, or you're writing a book and you can take 2 weeks off. These guys, there is no option for that. There is no 2 weeks off. Um, there is no chance for them to just kind of be free again, especially if they're running their own restaurant. Um, and so there's that level of pressure that people don't really see. But then it's just a matter of everything else, the social media landscape, the the things that they have to worry about on a regular basis is no longer just within the confines of that restaurant. It's perception from everywhere. And whether that's a ratings organization, whether that's the Michelin Guide, whether that's a local food publication, a local newspaper, and then you have Yelp, Google, Facebook reviews, all of these companies that have built communities around people rating and reviewing products and services and restaurants. Nobody takes into account that at the end of the day, these guys have to churn this out day in and day out. They're not building one product that is going to get reviewed thousands of times. They're building tens of products at a time over and over and over and over again that are constantly being reviewed. So it's just a whole different landscape than what it used to be.
You had a good perspective yesterday where you said some of these people coming in, especially Yelp or some of these garbage sites, people don't have a frame of reference on which to judge. Like last night, I couldn't review where we went. Feel free to make fun of me throughout the course of this interview. I don't like where we meet people. But it was a great night. I mean, the experience was fantastic. The staff was amazing. The hospitality was on point. I know that meal was great. Whether that was to my palate or not, it's a whole other story.
Right.
That's not their fault. That's a matter of where I grew up.
Yeah.
But similar, I wouldn't even imagine getting on Yelp and going, well, this was awful.
Right.
Because it wasn't.
Right.
It was world class. I just don't have the palate developed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss that. I think a lot of people miss the fact that if you're going to go into an experiential restaurant and experience something that you can't get at your average restaurant, you need to be ready to expand what you're experiencing and understand that just because it's not like your ideal of the most amazing food in the world, you have to take it within the context of what it is. And if it's a French restaurant, if it's a Spanish restaurant, if it's an Italian restaurant, you may be used to the Americanized version of that cuisine. But when you're going into these kinds of restaurants, you have to be ready to experience it from the aspect of what is the authentic way of presenting these kinds of dishes, and then how are they taking it to a world-class level. And I think a lot of people, they will go out there and they'll write a review, or they'll make a comment about a particular restaurant or particular meal, and completely outside of the context of what's the intention behind that food. What are they trying to do with that food? And yeah, do they want everybody to love the food that they cook? Absolutely they do. But at the same time, I think it's a bit unfair for reviewers to go on and bash a restaurant because they don't understand the food, or they don't get the cuisine. And I know that really frustrates the chefs, but at the same time, most of them are like, well, we're not going to change those people, so we can't waste energy on it. They just have to keep focusing on their craft and continuing to perfect it. And hopefully sometimes they take that feedback and improve things. If they get somebody who's like, hey, all I want to do is give objective feedback on my experience. Hopefully they take that and they improve the restaurant. They improve, the service, the food. Ultimately, we all benefit from that. But if you just trash somebody's restaurant or a particular meal because you don't understand that cuisine, that's a bit unfair to these guys. I think that we've just made it too easy for everybody just to have negative comments about anything they want without any kind of basis in knowledge. That do they even understand what they were eating? Do they even understand?
And can they even empathize or put it in a way that are you perfect?
Right.
Do you do everything exactly perfect every single
Right.
time? And if they do, great. And if they did, I don't think they have time to do reviews.
Right. Right.
So it's tricky, man, because everybody's out there. I really think everybody's trying to do their best, whether it's a farmer, a restaurant, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's room for criticism no matter where you go.
Absolutely.
And it's tough. It's tough to go out there and do anything
right
nowadays. But that's also what separates the best from the average.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take it? Can you grow from it? Can you learn to ignore what you need to ignore?
Yeah, and I definitely think that you see that these guys, even though they may get frustrated about a particular review or something, they don't let it, dull their passion, and they know that these things are going to happen. They also know that they're not going to please everybody, and if they go out there and they try to please every single person on the face of this planet, you're destined for failure, because it's just not going to happen. And so they have to go out with the mindset of, we need to create the best possible cuisine that we can personally create, and hope that it hits the mark with our target audience, knowing that our target audience isn't every single person.
Another thing that you mentioned when we were driving around yesterday, and I was totally blown away because I never thought about it, but so there's a lot of new development. A lot of neighborhoods going up, a lot of, we want to get the gentrification right now, but with all this building and all this construction, there's not so much a need for retail space. We're building mixed use places, but mixed use means services, restaurants, that kind of thing.
Things that still need a person.
Yeah, so which very much includes restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
But with all the new constructions, you have a great point. Where's all the new chefs going to come from?
Right. Where are the new chefs going to come from? Where are the patrons for those restaurants going to come from? And so there's this overdevelopment of the scene, and the chefs, don't get me wrong, they're being given opportunities that are really tough to pass up when these developers, they need to create a neighborhood within a block, and so they want to bring in the next new hip trendy restaurant that and rightfully so drives traffic around their development, which makes that property more valuable. And so the reasons behind it are sound. The challenge is that the development is happening so fast that a city can't sustain but so many restaurants per person. It just can't. And so when money and space is being thrown at these chefs and these opportunities with very little risk to opening a restaurant, even though, don't get me wrong, they're still taking substantial risks unless they're just playing with house money, which some of it is. Why wouldn't you go and take that opportunity? And so then it's a matter of, okay, how are you going to staff that restaurant? Are there going to be enough quality front of the house, back of the house personnel to staff that restaurant to meet the caliber that they're setting out to do? And we're seeing it here in DC that there's just not the number of personnel for the amount of restaurants that are opening. And also there's just not the population growth yet that is needed to sustain this many new restaurants within such a short period of time.
I think it was interesting when you talked about the staffing issue and almost having to cannibalize other restaurants, either within the restaurant group or restaurants in general, that it has forced a shift in the way staff is treated in the back of the house.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, not only is it just good for business to make sure your employees are happy and they're engaged and they're excited to be there and they don't feel demeaned when they're at work, but also people in an industry where there's a shortage of quality personnel, they don't have to take that kind of treatment. They don't have to be demeaned. They can feel like a valued member of a team, and they should feel like a valued member of a team wherever they are. And it's not just a matter of, I need a job, so I have to take this treatment. And so chefs have to become leaders in not only the emotional balance of the restaurant, but they also have to really treat it more like a family that everybody has value. Because if one of your team members leaves, finding somebody that's of the quality that you need in your restaurant is not the easiest thing to do, because there's so many options out there for people in this industry. Um, so it really, probably for the best, it's forced a more positive atmosphere within kitchens, and, but it has changed a shift from these um, the times where chefs essentially can do and say whatever they want without any consequence. I think that those times are completely over. I don't think we'll ever go back to that, because I think that people don't have to put up with that kind of environment if they don't want to. So that is going to be one of the real positives for the industry, because it'll be an industry that people can work in, and you're seeing more chef owners that understand that people need to have some sort of work-life balance to stay happy, stay healthy. Otherwise, people just get burnt out too quick. So I think that those things are going to help the industry. But the plethora of new restaurants that are opening all around big cities, that's you're I believe that you're going to see more restaurants closing as a result of that, because their businesses are just being cannibalized, essentially, whether it's by the same restaurant group or it's just by the new trendy restaurant down the street. And then that restaurant opens, this restaurant starts to struggle, staff gets pulled from this restaurant to this restaurant, and then it's just a vicious cycle. And so you'll see, I think that you'll see a decent amount of restaurants closing in the coming years as a result of all of these new restaurants opening. So it'll be the ones that actually understand how to evolve, how to continue moving businesses forward and running a stable enterprise. They'll be the ones that'll survive. But it's a very interesting time to be coming into this business, this line of business from an outsider's perspective.
Well, and that's really what I wanted to talk to you, is because you're deep enough in a higher class of restaurant, and you've done it for long enough now that you've been able to pinpoint some of these differences. And this is what people don't talk about. I mean, what are our clients having to go through in daily business, and how can we empathize that so we can serve it better? Right. And I think you really illustrated a lot of points that are easy to boss under the table.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just quit ordering from me because it's slow, and they might blame some arbitrary evil thing that doesn't exist, when there's a lot of things to consider that you can't see on the surface.
Right.
And unless you're talking to these guys like you do on deliveries, and like Jeff does on deliveries, you miss a lot.
Right. And you have to understand them at a personal level, and understand that they're running a business too. And
they may not be reporting to just themselves.
Right. You don't know who's pulling strings behind them all the time. You don't know, even if they're a chef owner, you don't know what investors are behind them and what investors are pushing on the back of them. And so I think that these guys, you can look at it through the lens of, oh man, the restaurant's struggling, so they're not ordering from us anymore, or they're cutting their orders. What's going on? Did we do something
wrong? They don't like me personally.
Yeah. And you kind of get into this internal self-doubt of like, do we really have like a quality of product to maintain? But then once you take a step back and you realize that there's so much more going on that you may not understand, that you may not see, and a lot of that they don't really want you to see. They want to show that everything's okay, even though it may not be on the back end. And so you need to be empathetic to what they may be going through. And some of it may be completely outside of their control. And so then it's on us as a vendor to understand that these cycles happen, and we have to continue to evolve. Also, we have to spread ourselves out wider. and work with more restaurants so that way when one's struggling over here, we have plenty in as a part of our base to really maintain the business going forward, because inevitably restaurants come and go. That's just the cycle of the industry. They're going to come and go, and so we need to make sure that we're spreading ourselves out as opposed to just depending on a small handful of restaurants. And also diversifying within the culinary industry. There's a lot out there outside of just restaurants. You have institutional organizations, you have catering companies, you have big banquet venues that also are looking for high quality products and products that are grown sustainably and within the local economy. And so diversifying that customer base is critically important, and it's something that we're going to focus a lot on in the coming months, to really break outside of just the mold of the highest of the high end restaurants.
Well, even within the restaurant, you can diversify. We talk, your stuff is showing up on pastries, it's showing up in various desserts, breads, and of course it's going to the bar area, which is a whole other revenue generator, a part of, but sometimes in complete separation from the restaurant itself.
Yeah, definitely, and it's been really interesting because you almost have to target those individuals depending on the restaurant, where you have to talk to the pastry chef to get your products into pastry. You have to talk to the bartender or the mixologist to get your products into the bar. Because at a lot of restaurants, the ordering may go through a single channel, but they're all coming in saying what they need. And if they're not used to ordering from you or knowing that these products are out there and available to them, you may be missing additional revenue opportunities within the same establishment, within the same order, and same delivery. And so we definitely have to diversify that out. And we're going to push that a little bit more, especially getting more into the bar area, because we know that bartenders and mixologists out there are trying to continue to evolve and use new techniques and new ingredients. And so
that's a race to the top, man. I mean, that's right. It's just exploding.
Oh yeah, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think that as it evolves, it just becomes more and more popular because people are like, "Holy cow, I can go to this bar and get this amazing experience, or I can just go and get an average drink somewhere else." And so people are starting to really seek out those experiences in the cocktail industry as well.
The other thing about doing that, like going out for an evening and doing like a cocktail run versus, you may not have a couple of $100 or $300 to drop on a meal per person,
right?
But you can go to the best of these cocktail bars. Look, man, the drinks can be $15, $16 a piece, but
or 30.
When you take a trip to Chicago at some point, but yeah, I mean. But it's a much lower barrier of entry for that level of service.
Oh, absolutely. And some of these cocktail bars are just as hard to get into as some of these high-end restaurants too. You have to have reservations weeks in advance. It's like, all I want to do is go have a drink. Well, when you want to have a drink at the best,
if you're booked, you're booked.
Yeah, you gotta put in the time and effort to get in there. And but you're right, you don't have to spend a couple $100 per person to go have an experience, and you can do it before you go out to dinner somewhere. Go into one of these cocktail bars, and most of them, even the higher end ones, have happy hours where you're not getting really big discounts, but at the same time they're open 4 or 5, 6 o'clock, where you could go before going out to dinner and have 2 experiences in one night. But also these experiential restaurants are broadening their cocktail menu and really focusing a lot in on, are they bringing something unique to the table from the cocktail program?
Or when they start blending performance art with the whole culinary experience.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the coolest things about kind of new restaurants and their design and everything, is how open everything is, and really allowing the patrons to see what's going on in the kitchen and be able to watch the excitement and how quickly things have to happen. And you now can really appreciate it that much more, and it's a spectacle. It's something that you're no longer just there and talking to the person right across from you. You're watching what's happening. You're seeing all these people buzz around, and you're seeing the chefs start to plate food, and that to me is a lot of fun to watch, because then you get to see it being created in front of you, and then experience it as you eat it. And we don't you in the restaurant industry, that hasn't been the case. Usually it's behind a set of doors.
Well, and you also realize that if they were going to serve 200 people that night, they're making 200 individual dishes. They're not pulling a ladle out of a pot,
Right.
and hey, we made enough to feed 2,200 people,
Right.
and slop, slop, slop. It's not the case.
Right. Exactly. Well, and
it's a real heavy statement, because it's until you see it, you don't realize it. I mean, you don't realize that, hey, they didn't cook 200 meals, but they prepped enough for these type of meals,
yeah,
and each one is going to be individually made every single moment from nest to bowls.
right. Exactly. And even if there's some pre-made, they may have some pre-made sauces and things like that. It's like you said, it's not ladling into a bowl. It's very careful placement and the plating of these products, and how you visualize that dish when it comes and is placed in front of you. They think through all of those details, and it's so critical for them to make sure that each plate carries an elevated experience. So you can't have just, oh, that plate's a little sloppy. No, that doesn't. If somebody's coming in and paying that kind of money, and you're in this kind of restaurant at that caliber, nothing's acceptable beyond perfection and excellence at every turn. And yeah, are things going to happen? Are there going to be challenges in plating and service? Are there going to be mistakes that are made? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean they don't every single dish strive for excellence. And you can see it in the finished product when you have 5 plates of the same thing, and they may not look exactly the same because they may have a different color flour here. That's on purpose, because it's not supposed to look like a factory. But at the same time, you can see the care that goes into plating every single one, and the angle of the petal of the flower, or the angle of the leaf on the plate. Somebody's thought about that. Somebody has carefully put that there, and so the amount of care that they take, the amount of care
that was almost a sneeze, everybody.
Yeah, right. I was waiting for it. The amount of care they take for every dish, I don't think unless you see it happening, we consider that.
And look, if this is the type of people that we want to service from our farms, or let's just be aware of, if we're going to have that empathy, if we're going to have that understanding of our client, these are the things you have to pay attention to,
right?
Or at least know enough that this is really not what I want to do as a farmer.
Right.
I'm going to go play a different medium.
Sure.
That's fine too.
And everybody needs that. We need farmers that are working with the mom and pop restaurants. We need farmers that are working with fast casual restaurants. We need farmers that are working with your mid-tier casual dining places. And then we need farmers that are working at the highest end of the industry, because we need sustainably minded farmers for all of these places at all of these price points. And I'm not saying that one farmer should make more than the other farmer. But what I am saying is that all of these places need options to buy sustainably grown, environmentally, environmentally minded farmers growing their crops for them. And if we just think that only the best restaurants in the world can get access to really flavorful crops grown in sustainable ways, I think we're missing a big part of the market.
If we're going to design our business, we need to know who we're designing it for.
Right.
And it has to be very intentional. If you were to design your farm back in the day to service food trucks, and now you're playing in this realm, how different would the design have been? How different would the delivery have been?
Yeah, it would have been substantial. Number one, we probably would have had a drive-up window. Food trucks, they're not selling where that truck lives at night. So they're going to their place. So imagine a food truck on their way in, they pull the food truck up, here's your products for the day, you're off and running. The production mix that we do and how the farm is set up would be completely different, because we would be going with still very high quality crops, but more high volume, high turnover crops, because these food trucks need to spit out, a couple hundred lunches within 2 hours, and so it needs to be quick crops that don't take a lot of care on the end, like when they're plating food. Uh, but we would have just looked at all of the financial aspects of the business. We would have looked at the setup of the farm, the design, the engineering, completely different than what we did here. And one of the big aspects that I think is often overlooked is that you may want to build a farm, but you have to understand exactly who your target customer is before you even start thinking about what does the farm look like? What are the crops that I'm going to grow? Where is my price point going to be? Because if you haven't picked out your target customer, you don't know what that market is going to need. You don't know what the opportunities are for that market.
So let's talk about that. I mean, you were sitting in an office, decided that wasn't for you, and it was time for you to move on, and you had access to a great chef right off the bat.
Yeah.
Were you already thinking about going this route, or did that play a major influence as you were starting to design the farm? 'Cause I feel like we've known each other, like 3 years now?
Going on it.
Yeah, and I remember those early days. Whenever you were talking to this cat, and it just seemed like that was the natural progression for you to go down. But I don't know if you're looking at it beforehand, or if that just was the pinnacle of where you started.
Right. Yeah. No. So I had already had it in my mind about working with chefs, and creating the most flavorful crops possible. Um, Before I had the conversation, was lucky enough to build a relationship with Chef Wiemeyer. And that to me, his confirmation that it was
I didn't put it together, but that's who that was last night.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that was our first customer, was that restaurant. And so he gave me not only the confidence that we could grow things at the highest level that these incredibly discerning chefs would be willing to spend good money on, but at the same time that we could convince them that indoor hydroponically grown crops also could taste amazing, and start to change that preconceived notion about those kinds of crops. And so it then went from there to, okay, if this market is right for this, which he helped us confirm, what does that crop mix look like? What is a farm that's designed to grow for these kinds of chefs? What does that look like? And then we had to go through and look at the financials of it, understand what are they spending on products like this now? What are a good sample set of products that we can grow for them, that we know we can elevate to a high enough level that can demand a premium price, not only because it's locally grown, it's sustainably grown, but it's just better. It just tastes better. It just looks better. And how can we then turn that into a business that can be relationship based, where we know these chefs personally, we know what they like, we know what they don't like, but also make it scalable to where it's not just a one-off small boutique farm for one region. How do we perfect the systems and the processes to make this business scalable? Because the opportunities out there are enormous. As more and more people go out to eat, understanding those different market levels within the culinary arena, you can start shaping entire businesses around one tier of the restaurant industry. And I think that's what's really exciting about it, is that if you actually look at all these different aspects of the restaurant industry, you could focus in and get really, really tight in a niche and be really successful there. Or you can broaden out and try to appeal to all these different tiers by growing a small handful of really, really good crops at an affordable price that even some of your smaller mid-tier restaurants can afford and at volume. And so I think that the opportunities out there are really big, but you have to understand before you even go down the path of designing the farm who you're targeting and what is the demographic that you're going after. Otherwise, you're going to be essentially driving with, one eye closed and the other eye slightly squinted. You think you see where you're going, but your depth perception isn't really all there. And you can't fully understand what are the not only economic opportunities, but what are the tangible changes that you have to make within your farm setup to support those different market areas.
You planned this out well over a year.
Mm-hmm.
Was there stops that you were finding mentally, saying, "Is this the right thing for me? Do I want to leave this job?" And you made well back in the day at the
Cloud computing.
Yeah. You were doing well for yourself with
Mm-hmm.
cloud computing, and now you're almost. There's no almost. I mean, you're risking a great paycheck to jump.
Yeah.
We tested a lot. What was keeping you from? Was there anything that could have happened to have shifted that to an earlier state for you personally?
Shifted the tune like
this is it. This is what I want to do. Or did it just take that long to test it all out to where it made sense?
I mean,
because no matter what, it was a risk.
Oh yeah, definitely. When I made the decision that I was going to go down this path, it was a rather quick decision after I'd already done a few months of research on it. This is the path that I want to go. I talked to people I love, the people I'm closest with, mentors and friends about it. Some of them thought I was absolutely crazy, but then when I explained to them my underlying reasoning for it, they started to understand it a little bit more. But how it then took shape in terms of what is the size that we're going to be, what is the exact market that we're going to work within. That took quite a few months of planning and running financial numbers and understanding, what is our crop mix really going to look like? What does the farm actually have to produce? That took quite a while. But that was after I had already convinced myself that in some way, shape, or form, I was going to go down this path. How that manifested itself, that was what I was trying to figure out in the ongoing analysis, and trying to understand what the market opportunity was, and then how do we fit ourselves within it.
What has happened since that you're just completely sure? What did you not plan for that's happened? We've talked about the fungus issue before, and that put a stop on it for a few months. But reception-wise, day-to-day operations, what's been the biggest surprise after the planning that you couldn't have planned for?
Yeah, I would say the growth of our sales revenue without expending sales and marketing dollars, it happening through word of mouth. That was how fast it happened. Was really a surprise. And then when chefs asked, why don't I know about you? Because we haven't really gone out there and tried to make ourselves known to everybody. Number one, part of that was strategic because we knew that if we tried to service, 40 restaurants out of the gate, that we would fall on our face and likely fail, and the quality just wouldn't be there. But number two, by having that word of mouth growth, you come in with instant credibility because all these chefs talk, they all know each other, and they tell each other where they're getting the best products. And so for us, it was a matter of how do we take what we know is a quality product, really build these relationships with these chefs, and then allow ourselves to refine our process, refine how the farm operates, and really handle some of these hurdles when we don't have 40 or 45 customers, as opposed to when we may have those down the road. We'll then have the process in place. We'll understand what it takes to deliver to 30 restaurants in a day, without doing that all at once. And so for me, it was how fast the sales revenue, once we really started actively putting ourselves out there, how fast those sales revenues grew, but that they all happened through word of mouth. I'm not a natural salesman. I don't really enjoy cold selling. But at the same time, that's just, as a business owner, that's just what you have to do. And so for me, it was a matter of how do I balance, the organic growth through word of mouth versus the need to continue to expand the sales base. And I think we're now in the process of shifting gears to doing a little bit more outreach, to try to diversify out our base a little bit more. But that was one of the things that really took us by surprise. None of our modeling took into account having a couple of restaurants that spent quite a lot of money every week and took up a lot of space in the farm. So we didn't account for any of that. We just couldn't have foreseen that. But at the end of the day, that allowed us to work with a small handful of restaurants while really refining our processes, while also not running out of money at the same time. Because we were really, really close to running out of money. And then the sales just naturally ticked up, and that really allowed us to stay in business. And it happened at the exact perfect time, and now we're moving into the next phase where we need to expand ourselves out a little bit more and broaden our base, while continuing to grow those sales numbers.
You said something yesterday that I think everybody feels. I'm interested to see how you reconcile that within your internal brain. You said that when you first started, you had like an imposter syndrome, like, do you, it was really interesting to me because you said, do I deserve to be here? Do I deserve to be working with these types of clients?
I still have it. I still go through it. It's actually very natural to have that, questioning of whether or not you're worthy to be here. Have you put in the time, the effort to really deserve to be working with this class of a restaurateur? And I think that at the end of the day, we've put a lot of time into this, a lot of literal blood, sweat, and tears into this. And when you set out to do something, I'm not the type of person that's going to try to pick the easiest path. I'm going to pick the path that I believe has the most opportunity for success. And this is the path that we've chosen. But every day I still am like, what am I doing? Where did I come from to get to this point? To where am I going? And businesses, especially young businesses, constantly go through inflection points. And so we go through them all the time of, okay, do we try to broaden ourselves out a little bit more? Do we, when we're looking at designing a new farm, what does that farm really look like? Are we going to try to change up the business at all? But that's what's nice about being a young and agile business, is that you can think through all of those opportunity areas and understand, okay, what is the best path for the business? But I still question on a pretty regular basis, am I doing the right thing here? Is this really, have I made the right decisions? But I don't necessarily think that that's an unhealthy aspect. I wish I didn't question it as much, but at the same time, that forces me to have to think about, okay, if this is the right choice, what can I do to maximize this choice? What can I do to ensure that it is successful in the long term? We didn't get into this to make quick money. We didn't get into this to become, millionaires many times over. We got into this to try to make positive change in the food system and to try to really put our stamp on the food system, both locally, regionally, and then hopefully nationally. Um, and one of the ways that we saw we could do that is working with the chefs at the highest end of the market and really using their influencer value to push down some of these, ultimately the values that we hold in terms of sustainability, in terms of running a business the right way and making decisions that are not only based on financial sustainability, but economic sustainability and environmental sustainability all along the way. And not having to, not coming at it from the mindset of, I want to make $1 million in 3 years, and then I want to sell the company for however much money and get out and go do something else. Looking at it through the mindset of, this is a long-term game. This is something that's going to take time, but we're also just scratching the surface of what the possibilities are.
I think it's interesting that you wanted to make changes like this, sustainability changes within the local food economy, but you realize it comes from the top down. Other restaurateurs, other restaurants, other eating habits, other food trends are not being pushed from the bottom up. They're coming down from these chefs.
Mm.
But it is going to take a long time.
Right.
And some people may look at this and go, well, could you have made a more impact, sooner? Mm. But is sooner more important, or is more impactful more important?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we would love to make as much impact as soon as we possibly can, but at the same time, we have to be realistic in terms of, if you're sustainable in the long term, your overall impact can be far greater than if you're just trying to be as impactful as you possibly can as soon as you possibly can. Because then that shifts your focus a little bit. And so it is about making sure that the business long term is financially viable, and that we're not looking to grow as fast as we can and expand as fast as we can, because that ultimately can also doom the business. And so then the impact you have is greatly diminished, obviously. But if you set out, you really plan out for the long term, and you think about the aspects that come into play as the business grows, and then how do you make sure that as the business grows, your level of impact grows. And so we saw it as, let's work with the best of the best and the people that can really move the needle in terms of how people think about food, how people understand where their food comes from, and then let's allow that to then push down those changes throughout the food system. Because you then have this dual effect. People understand from the influencers of the food industry what we need to be thinking about, talking about, and understanding about our food. And then they think about that within their own context and their own eating habits. And so I think chefs do have a pretty big role in making our food system more sustainable, more environmentally friendly. But that's something that's going to take time. These aren't things that happen overnight.
If change is coming down from the best chefs, where's our opportunity as other farmers to initiate change within farming, initiate a sense of leadership, a sense of, this guy did this amazing thing. Can we build our farm, not to replicate yours, but can we build our farm to complement our space within the ecosystem that you've created here in DC or anywhere else in the country? When is it going to click with people that farmers working with other farmers is, if we really want to push this ball forward farther and faster?
Yeah,
it's such a clear path.
Right. Oh, it definitely is. And I think that understanding, what are the other farmers doing out there? And if you just try to copy what other farmers are going to do, well, you're number one, you're going to be going up directly against another local farmer that, unless your product is far better than theirs, or you're somehow just undercutting their price point, nobody really wins in the end there. Because number one, you're not likely maximizing the revenue of your farm by undercutting the price points, but you're also then forcing a continued price war to the bottom, which is what we've seen for a very long time. Farmers continue to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed on price.
And that's an easy thing for a restaurant to do, is to, well, let's squeeze this farmer on price, or we'll just keep buying the cheaper products.
Because some already dictated that it's okay to charge less.
Correct. Exactly. And so that then, turns into just this vicious cycle where everybody's trying to keep up and everybody keeps having to lower their prices. Ultimately, quality suffers. The level of care that a farmer can afford to take suffers. How much they can afford to pay their personnel is going to dramatically suffer. And so nobody really wins in that. The chefs get a lower quality product. They may save a few bucks, but ultimately that lower quality product makes it onto the dish, meaning the dish is a lower quality dish. And so it really has to be an effort all throughout to understand that you should spend more money on a higher quality product. There's no other industry that you could make that argument where, oh, well, yeah, it may be better, but I can get it for cheaper over here, so I'm going to go that way. Well, no, you expect that you're going to pay a little bit more for a higher quality product. And so if farmers, they know that they are growing a superior product, then they should charge a price that is in line with that level of quality. And they shouldn't accept just constantly lowering their prices, because chefs understand what their costs are. They also understand that they have a certain margin that they have to hit, and they don't go out and just lower their prices just to bring customers in the door all the time. They understand that this is how much it costs us to run this restaurant. This is how much the food on this dish costs, and this is the margin that we have to make. And farmers, I think, need to do the same thing. They need to understand we need to make a certain amount of margin to make sure that we have a long-term sustainable business that can continue to grow and can continue to thrive and provide good paying jobs in the community. Since when did farming have to become a low paying job? Why isn't that seen as a quality career choice for people? Well, because nobody wants to go in and work 60, 70 hours a week and make, $40,000 or $50,000 growing an incredible product, but not getting the value out of it from the end customer because they just keep on getting squeezed. So I think that we as the farmer community need to understand that working together, and I'm not talking about price fixing, but I am talking about working together to understand what is the value of these crops. And if we all just try to keep racing to the bottom to meet, the demands of chefs who say they want to buy local, say they want to buy the highest quality, well, then that comes with a cost. And the farmers need to understand the quality of their product and charge accordingly. And don't have the mindset that, oh, well, if I just lower my price by 25%, I can sell X amount more. Yes, but at what quality? What are you sacrificing to do that? And is your business then financially viable over the long term? And so I think farmers need to rethink margins and need to rethink, what is their product worth? And we as just Americans in general don't put enough value on food. We always want to buy the cheapest food. We always want to buy, go to get the special deal. Well, that's a bit misguided because ultimately you're getting lower quality food that's produced in industrial ways that we're finding isn't actually all that healthy for us. And so I think that not only does there have to be a shift from the farmers, there also has to be a shift in mindset in terms of what is the value of really good food, and be willing to pay that and spend more of our income on high quality food that actually makes us healthier versus stuff, if you will.
Well, to your point, if we build a farm to exactly emulate another farmer, there's a huge disconnect because your market research has not been done.
Mm.
You based a farm off of systems and off of a process that you fully don't understand and can't understand the little nuances.
Right.
You said it real good yesterday that it's not about the how you're growing and what you're growing, but all the little things that make it possible.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, right? But unless people are in it every single day, it's really hard to account for a lot of these changes. But if we've spent the first half of this conversation talking about the mind and the life of a chef, if you build this farm after somebody else, you miss all that. You miss the conversations that you built your farm on.
Right. Yeah. You don't get the full context of what it takes to build a successful operation, and you don't understand what actually goes in behind the scenes. And ultimately, especially if you're doing it in the same local market, if all you're doing is go in and copying what somebody else has done, well, you're going to come to the table and the chefs are already going to be working with the existing farm. And then what are you bringing? How are you bringing value to that relationship? If you're growing it at a similarly high quality, but all you're doing is coming in and saying, oh, I can sell it to you for 5 or 10% less, who are you helping? Yeah, your business may be successful in the short term, but ultimately that's not a very good long-term strategy for maintaining a successful business and growing an industry. If you're just going to come in and all you're doing is copying somebody else and not bringing anything unique to the table, you're not adding any value to the industry. And so I think that when people set out to build a farm and understanding, what their market is, they should look at how they can be different from the existing purveyors that are out there on the market and bring something new to the table instead of just bringing the same stuff that's already out there, and understanding what it takes to actually bring something that's a higher quality, actually bring something that's new and produces value on your customers' end.
And if somebody's out there listening going, well, that's all well and good, but where do you start? I would say you do exactly what you did yesterday. All 9 times we went and did a delivery. You asked people what changes were coming up, if they needed anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you constantly ask these questions. I would imagine most weeks that you go and get their feedback, because you never know what went across their radar in those 7 days or 2 days or however long it was you saw them. It's just a matter of getting in front of the right people at the right time. And to do that, you obviously have an in because you were there. But before that, there's plenty of events you can go to. There's plenty of networking things you can do to get out and about.
Right. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people aren't willing to do that level of effort when they're doing their research. Is you need to have conversations with your target market before you build this stuff out, before you spend all this money. And
before you worry about NPK and dissolved oxygen and all that, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You haven't hit the nail on the head with your buyer.
Right. Exactly. And so you need to understand what you're going to be trying to grow, but you also then need to understand what does your market want to buy? What are they looking for that they can't currently get, or what could you improve upon that would add more value?
Here it's not growing.
Right. Exactly. And that is one of those areas that I don't think people spend enough time on. No, so I don't think people spend enough time on focusing on differentiating themselves, but understanding what the market needs for you to differentiate. And everybody's like, oh, I'm going to build a farm and I'm going to grow cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers. Okay, fantastic. How are you going to differentiate yourself from the other farmer that's doing the exact same thing and probably has done it for 10 years, if not much longer? How are you going to differentiate yourself from the national brands that have produced, hundreds of thousands of pounds of these products and really understand how to grow them well? How are you going to differentiate yourself from them and bring value to your end customer?
Oh, and by the way, it may not just be in the produce.
Right.
It may be in the ordering system, or the way people can pay, or where they can pick it up, or are you delivering? I mean, there's all these other ancillary business aspects that we don't worry about whenever we're designing a farm. Look, and I'm guilty of that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I got after it, but I had to figure it out real quick.
Right.
It wasn't the damn produce. The quality was great. People loved it, but it was, can I get that produce in a way in front of people that had meaning to them?
Yeah.
And that was a clear choice that it was going to be much easier for them to do.
Right. And I think that, if you don't think about that customer experience, the entire customer experience, how is their interaction with your organization? You're missing a really big part of success in that it's not just the product, it's how they interact with you. It's the relationship that we have with you. And like Jeff, I mean, he's a master at it. He's a master of relationships. He's incredible when he's having those conversations, and the information that he can get out of people is crazy. Even the information that he got out of me and in our many conversations, I love it.
Psychotherapy couch.
Yeah, exactly.
Love you, Jeff.
Yeah, we do. But that's a skill that entrepreneurs have to learn. They have to understand that that's not an option. You can have the best possible product in the world, but if that's it, if that's all you have, and you don't have a customer experience, you don't have that relationship with your customers, you're easily replaced. They put far more value on that relationship and that experience and the quality of the product. Everything together adds up to be successful and to make you the go-to purveyor of whatever you're growing. And I think that a lot of people are like, we're just going to focus on growing the best possible product. That's wonderful, and you have to think about that. But you can't lose sight of the fact of, how does that product get to market? What are the constraints that product's going to have at the customer level? How can you make the dollar that the customer spends with you far more valuable than just that dollar? How can you make their lives easier? How can you make it more convenient for them to get the highest quality product? And so you have to think about that whole customer timeline of success. How do you originally engage with that customer? How do you reach out to them? Something that I personally struggle with in terms of cold selling, and I just don't like it. But at the same time, you have to understand it. You have to understand when you can talk to these guys. What is their schedule like?
Yeah, on that, if you do the things you're talking about, if you're understanding the schedules, if you're understanding, is it really cold calling? Because you may not have done, maybe the first time you're talking to that one person,
Mm-hmm.
but because you know the industry and what they go through, and sure, I bet you looked at it before you even called them. Is it really cold? And could you find comfort in the fact that you can now do so much research ahead of time, right, before you even pick up the phone?
Right, exactly. And so it depends on who you're talking to. Some chefs, if you go in the off hours, can be very welcoming. But also, you go in at a time where they're a little busy or they're having a hectic day, well, they automatically have a bad taste in their mouth because nothing was set up in advance. They didn't know you were coming, and they frankly just don't have time for you to be there when you're there. And so you need to be sympathetic to that. You need to understand that these are very busy people who don't have just extra moments here and there. And so how you approach them, the time you approach them, and do you make it easy for them to understand what you're doing, try some of your products, and then either come on board as a customer or give it some thought, see if your products work into their menu. How do you make that process as easy as possible and as painless for them to become a new customer of yours? Because ultimately, they're getting products from other purveyors already. Adding another purveyor into the mix isn't always the easiest thing for them to do. And so you need to make that a painless process so that way they can come on board. It's convenient for them. And ultimately, you can gain more customers faster the easier you make that onboarding process. And I think a lot of people overlook that.
A lot of people, and I want your opinion on this, think that indoor growing, I want to know if you thought it, is year round. But they don't account for the seasonality of their client affecting the seasonality of their farm.
Right. Yeah, and so we didn't put enough thought into that. We didn't put enough thought into the fact that these guys are so used to working within the seasons that having crops that are available in winter or available in summer in the depths of winter, yes,
will some chefs still use those products, but not nearly to the level that they'll use them in the certain seasons that they're typically available, because that's just the way they're used to doing it. And so we didn't put enough time into understanding when should we start fall crops, when should we start winter crops, when should we start spring crops, because they still are rotating those menus. They're still coming up with new menus for the different seasons based on the other ingredients that they're getting. We're only a part of the puzzle. And so if everything else, all the other ingredients that are making up these dishes are all seasonal, well, then we need to adapt to that. And just because we can grow 365 days a year doesn't mean that we don't have to work within the seasonality of the culinary arena, because at the end of the day, everything else is still driven by the seasons. And so we need to understand, yes, can we make products available all year round? Absolutely. We also need to understand what they're using for their dishes and make sure that our products complement those dishes during those specific seasons. Because they are going to change. The flavors of the dishes change. What they're going for in terms of the impactfulness of certain characteristics of a dish change from season to season. And so we need to understand that, and then we need to make sure that our crop mix complements that as best as possible, and rather isn't, these guys have amazing products that are available, but they don't necessarily complement this, warm and savory dish that we have for the middle of January. And so it's got to be on both ends. Yes, now you're making things available all year round, but at the same time, there's still constraints that the chefs have in terms of the other ingredients that they're using. And so you have to make sure that you take that into account when you're planning your crops.
Well, if we take that a step further, this is a great example of this month. It's December. Restaurants drop off in December. It's a little colder. In Dallas, we lose a lot of patio space. People won't get out in the rain and the bad weather. In December, people go to a lot of holiday parties.
Yeah.
They're saving any extra cash that they may have for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other obligations. If that restaurant is going to have a drop off and they have enough data to not freak out about it, it may be time for farmers to kind of brace for impact, especially that first season, because until you go a full season servicing your clients, you don't know when the drop offs are going to come.
Right. And like in this city, December is usually a historically high and busy time because of those holiday parties, because people are going out. It's in between, Thanksgiving and Christmas. People are going out on date nights because of the holiday season. They're going to events because of the holiday season. And then the party season as well is very big for these restaurants. These guys really start to see it in the January timeframe when everybody's spent all their money during the holidays, and then they don't do anything. And then Valentine's Day comes, and that's another busy time for them. But, understanding that there's going to be ebbs and flows in the level of business that the restaurants are doing. And so if you make sure that you have a broad enough base of customers to be able to withstand those, and then during the busy season, everything's sold out all the time. But during those off seasons, still having enough customers to sell the vast majority of the crop and getting it out the door is still critically important, because our costs don't change in the winter. Our costs stay the same in the winter. And so we have to understand that there are going to be shifts in the restaurant industry during some of these downtimes. And also, if, as we talked about earlier, as more and more restaurants open, everybody wants to go to the new trendy restaurant. And so we have to make sure that we're spread out, even if it's owned by the same chef. Yeah, exactly. And so we have to make sure that we're spread out enough to be able to withstand those shifts. But at the same time, not diminishing the relationships that we have with those existing restaurants and the quality that we bring to the table, just because we now have 50 customers as opposed to 15.
If we're going to close this thing out, I want to want to kind of look at what's coming up in the next year, and I'm going to base that off some historical things that I've seen you do over the years, which is attend things that you like. I know you've spoke locally on some panels. I know that you went to one hydroponic school I was at. We showed up at Indoor AgCon together, unplanned.
Yeah.
And then you came with Brandon and Jeff and I to New York. You go to places and you see what's going on in the arena, both in your planning stages and in your very early beginnings of operation. How critical are those moments?
I think they're huge. I mean, I think you need to get outside of your bubble and your comfort zone and go out and have conversations with people that are either doing it or doing something similar to you, or come with a different perspective than you do. And learning from others and being able to have conversations with others and get feedback on not only what you're doing, but understand somebody may have already had some of the problems that you're coming across. And how do you make sure that you don't repeat those same challenges or those same errors that may have been made by somebody else? And I think the best way to do that is to go out and meet people and understand that other people have had experiences that you can learn from. And you don't necessarily have to go through the same experience that they've already gone through, because you can just learn from their experience. And so I think that those aspects, not only when you're thinking of starting a farm, are absolutely critical. You need to get out, and you need to get outside of the local market too, because you need to see what's happening in other markets. But also talking to people up and down the industry, talking to the equipment suppliers and the vendors, talking to your technology suppliers, talking to other farmers, talking to other potential customers in other markets, and really understand the full breadth of what's out there, and not getting bogged down in your own bubble of, I'm planning this farm, I'm planning this business, because you're missing a lot of perspective that's out there that really helps you grow and see things, and you'll likely make some changes based on those conversations and based on those experiences. I know I did, both in the initial planning stages and then ultimately, when we started actually operating the business. Those experiences have really helped to shape the direction that we take the business as a whole.
When you talk about the local markets, I never ever would have thought that the administration change at the presidency would have, you always kind of wonder about a place that you don't live at. Of course, DC is one of those areas that you just probably, from an outsider's perspective, assume a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it was a big shift around here.
Yeah, it was. And, we didn't fully appreciate it until we had talked to a number of people about it. And this town, obviously, when you have big shifts like that, you have a lot of people that are coming in from the outside that are either part of a new administration or part of new delegations of some sort. They have different tastes, they have different desires, they have different things that they like to do in their free time. But this town can particularly be hit with those big shifts in terms of the movers and shakers that are coming into town. And we didn't anticipate that at all. We kind of assumed that, well, the population of DC doesn't really change all that much. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are in and out of DC, but by and large, the people that live around here, they're here. They're not moving in and out with an administration. But when you talk about places where movers and shakers go to eat and what they do in their free time, that can have a very big impact on some of these industries. And so we didn't foresee it. We weren't around to see the last changeover, so we weren't able to see, did that actually have a big impact? But ultimately, you need to be prepared for any kind of shift in your local economy. And you need to think about these things before they happen to make sure that your business is buffered in terms of major shifts, in terms of major economic downturns. And a lot of people just are looking at, how do we just keep going? How do we keep getting bigger and bigger? And they're not thinking about, how can we protect our business from major economic change, major political change, and really make it
a more sustainable business and more able to deal with those shifts in whether it's political changes, whether it's economic changes, so that way you're not caught off guard. You see what the potential changes are, and you've put a strategy in place to handle those changes. I think that's a lot. That's something that people don't always consider when they just see opportunity. They don't think about, okay, well, what happens if there's a major shift in the market? Is my business still viable? And that's a really hard thing to think about. But if you don't think about it, then you will be caught off guard. I think a lot of businesses deal with that on a regular basis.
Well, you just said it, opportunity, and there's the good thing about us is we always have another opportunity to do this again. I think we could probably stay here for another couple hours.
Yeah.
To what White and I did the other day, but I'm very thankful to be able to come out and visit you on a semi-regular basis.
Yeah, it's always a great time.
And see progress. I mean, over the last 2-3 years, it's been pretty phenomenal to watch from the beginning to where you are now. You've really done a fine job. I'm just happy to get to ride along sometimes with it. So,
thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a wild ride. So we look forward to it continuing.